Determine delta y and dy for the function y equals sine x, where x equals pi over 4 and delta x equals negative pi over 12. Delta y is y of x plus delta x minus y of x. For this problem, we have x is a pi over 4, so y of pi over 4, plus, and delta x is a negative pi over 12, minus y of pi over 4. We will need to combine the pi over 4 plus the negative pi over 12 through a common denominator. So I'm going to make the common denominator of 12 by multiplying the pi over 4 by 3 over 3. And then plus the negative pi over 12. And all of this minus y of pi over 4. So delta y will equal y of, multiplying the numerators, pi times 3 is 3 pi, over multiplying the denominators, 4 times 3 is a 12, plus a minus is minus pi over 12, and all of this minus y of pi over 4. So we have y of 3 pi minus 1 pi, which is 2 pi over 12, minus y of pi over 4. And 2 pi over 12 can be reduced by 2 to become pi over 6. So y of pi over 6 minus y of pi over 4. These can each be evaluated using the function y equals sine x. So delta y will equal y of pi over 6 will be the sine of pi over 6, minus y of pi over 4 will be the sine of pi over 4. And we will have the sine of pi over 6, which is a 1/2, minus the sine of pi over 4, which is a root 2 over 2. These are already over a common denominator, so they can be combined, 1 minus root 2 all over the common denominator of 2. There's our delta y. To find dy, we will have to take the derivative of the function y equals sine x. When we take the derivative, we will want to use the dy dx notation. The derivative of sine x is cosine x. We can then solve for dy by multiplying dx to the right side. So dy equals to cosine of x times dx. And we can replace dx with delta x to give it a value. So cosine of x times delta x. dy can now be found by plugging values in. We will have the cosine of x, which is a pi over 4, and then times delta x, which is a negative pi over 12. The delta x is not inside of the trig function. It can be moved to the front of it, or just multiplying times the result of the cosine of pi over 4. Cosine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2, and then times negative pi over 12. Multiplying the numerators, we'll have a negative, a root 2, and a pi, all multiplying. Multiplying the denominators, 2 times 12 is a 24. So we have that dy comes out to negative square root of 2 times pi all over 24.